I would like to welcome Billy Lowe, pastor of City Church, who will be leading us in tonight's invocation.
Thank you. Let us pray. Father, your word says that the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. And what we need more than anything as leaders in this community is wisdom. God, I pray that as this council meets, as they hear, that they would be discerning and wise in the decisions to help for flourishing happen all over this community. Lord, we're all grateful for your presence. We're grateful for these people and their leadership. And I ask that you would bless them in this city as we continue to seek your will. And we ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. I would like to call the regular meeting of the Milton City Council for Monday, May 15th, 2023 to order. The city strongly recommends that you review tonight's agenda carefully. And if you wish to speak on any item on the agenda, then please bring your comment cards to the clerk as soon as possible. While the Milton rules allow a speaker to turn in their comment card up until the clerk calls the agenda item, once the agenda item is called, no more comment cards can be accepted. Will the city clerk please call the roll and make general announcements?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll be happy to call roll for the May 15th, 2023 regular City Council meeting. I would like to remind all those in attendance to please silence all cell phones at this time. Those attending the meeting who would like to make a public comment, you are required to complete a public comment card. Your comment card must be presented to the city clerk prior to the agenda item being called. Any cards received after the item has been called will not be accepted. All speakers, please identify yourself by name, address, and organization before beginning your comment. If you are representing an organization, an affidavit is required stating you have the authority to speak on behalf of that organization. Please review tonight's agenda, and if you would like to make a comment, please bring your comment card to me now. Demonstration of any sort within the chamber is prohibited. Please refrain from any applause, cheering, booing, outburst, or dialogue with any person speaking. Anyone in violation will be asked to leave. As I call roll this evening, please confirm your attendance. Mayor Peyton Jamison.
Here.
Councilmember Andrea Bierhoff.
Here.
Councilmember Paul Moore.
Here.
Councilmember Juliette Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Carol Kirkley.
Here.
Councilmember Jan Jacobus.
Here.
Councilmember Rittenberg.
Here.
Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next is the approval of the meeting agenda. I would like to add an executive session to discuss land acquisition, personnel, and potential litigation. Do I have a motion?
Mayor, make a motion that we accept the agenda with the amendments that you have requested.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Moore and a second from Councilmember Verhoff to approve the meeting agenda with the added executive session. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. Next is general public comment. Do we have any general public comment?
Yes, Mayor, we do.
Okay. The next item is general public comment. Public comment is a time for citizens to share information with the mayor and the city council and to provide input and opinions on any matter that is not scheduled for its own public hearing during today's meeting. Each citizen who chooses to participate in public comment must complete a comment card and submit it to the city clerk prior to the agenda item being called. Please remember this is not a time to engage the mayor or members of the city council in conversation. When your name is called, please come forward and speak into the microphone stating your name and address for the record. You will have 5 minutes for remarks. The city encourages you to review the agenda, and if you wish to speak, to bring your comment cards to the city clerk right now. If Madam Clerk would please call the first public comment.
Mayor, I invite Nia Courtson to the podium, please.
Good evening, Nia Corson, 550 Owens Farm Road, Milton, Georgia. I've been a resident there for 17 years. I also think it's worth noting that I've worked the past 4 election cycles, not only in advance voting, but on election day. I am as surprised as you that I find myself back here once again to discuss the number of voting locations for the next election. The city of Milton conducted an open, transparent, and non-political process to discuss, debate, and vote on this issue. As you know, a feasibility study was also conducted with council, staff, and citizens. All meetings and findings were shared, giving the opportunity for anyone and everyone to provide public comment. These efforts helped to shape the debate and ultimate conclusion that each of you voted on. Despite a unanimous vote last December To proceed with the feasibility committee's recommendation, another vote was cast 2 weeks ago with ultimately the same results to move forward with the committee's recommendation. Unfortunately, Mayor Jameson's prepared statement and amended proposal has provided Appen Media with their talking points for the unfavorable article in last week's Milton Herald. Their article was the impetus behind the Twitter post from Stacey Abrams' very partisan Fair Fight Action Group and 4 other divisive political organizations. Their post was also referenced in the Atlantic Journal-Constitution. Here's one sentence. This proposal directly limits voting access by leaving voters in Southeast Milton without a nearby polling place, the area of the city which contains the highest number of Black and brown voters, unquote. This unnecessary negative and unfair press is not what our city needs, nor should desire. Is this really why we've reopened this issue? If this was such a concern, why did Mayor Jameson dismiss the committee's initial recommendation to have the second polling location at the Public Safety Complex, which is in District 3? Or better yet, why not discuss that at the April 17th work session where a more robust conversation could be debated? But instead, he made his remarks and amended proposal in the 11th hour just before the vote. Mayor Jameson claims that not adding a third location in District 3, quote, we have taken a step backwards and potentially several more steps, unquote. He goes on, we have created division within our community. The only one creating division within our community is you, Mayor Jameson, by your reckless, unfair, and untrue comments. Access to voting is paramount to all elections. District 3 citizens will have the same 216 hours of early voting to cast their ballot that all Milton residents will have, not to mention the additional 12 hours on Election Day, and the opportunity to vote via absentee by mail should they choose. By those parameters, I am confident any reasonable individual would agree that equal opportunity and equal access to all citizens is being provided. Lastly, Mayor Jameson and this entire council, you must be very careful not to send the wrong message to partisan organizations like Fair Fight and others, that if you don't like the outcome of a vote from this council, just write an ugly op-ed in the 11th hour with unjust accusations, and they'll reconsider their position. And I want to end with thanking the council members, the city staff, the 2 citizens who worked over a year to put together this proposal. You saw me throughout that year giving public comment and providing some insight through my work as a poll clerk and assistant manager. I am confident that they provided the most transparent, fair proposal that gives all citizens of Milton an opportunity to vote. All eyes are on Milton, especially now, and I will do what I can do to make sure that this election is the best yet. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Will you please call the next speaker?
Mayor, I invite Ronnie Rondum to the podium, please. And take your time.
My name is Ronnie Rondon. I live at 13390 Providence Lake Drive and been there since about 1994. We all watch the news, see what's going on pretty well. One of them has to do with the migrants coming over the border and coming into small cities, large cities, etc. And what I want to do is, we have all heard about the migrants crossing the USA borders in several states. To the best of my knowledge, neither Atlanta nor any of our suburbs have been directly affected by these migrants. However, many cities in other states have been forced, quote unquote, to receive these migrants or immigrants. without warning to the local city for their status or plans as to how the migrants should be treated, nor how they should be housed. My thoughts are that our mayor and city council should prepare for such an event. You may all say, oh, that can't happen to the city of Milton. I'm not thinking that such will happen here. However, being prepared for the worst will greatly help if such a case does happen here. Therefore, I recommend that the mayor and city council and the emergency officials, police and fire department, develop a plan to prepare for such an event. Who, what, where, and when should be in their domain and some degree of practice in case of such an event. Having 34 years in the Army, I know that preparations will most certainly reap good results. Oh, by the way, I'm an immigrant also. Thank you.
Thank you. Will you please call the next speaker?
Mayor, I invite Scott Peters to the podium, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. My name is Scott Peters, professional address 1100 Peachtree Street in Atlanta. I represent JLM Investments and Mr. Jefferson McConkey, who is here this evening, and I'm here to comment about the district at Mayfield. I know this is the first reading this evening, and it's on your agenda for the next time, but rather than wait to the last minute, there are a couple issues that we'd like to raise and hopefully have time to discuss rather than being in a rush at the final City Council meeting to adopt those. We are generally in support of the proposed amendment, and we think it is a good thing. We appreciate the city going through that process and including us in that, and believe what is being generated is close to a very good solution. There are two sections that we are concerned about, and I know most of this is technical, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I did want to raise it so that you are aware of it as we're engaging with council, and staff, and I have shared some of these comments with them. First is on the issue of the possible closure of portion of Mid-Broadwell. That is fine with us. We're in support of that. But however, there is some language in that section, which is section 3.5.7, specifically B, that says the public frontage standards along any portion of Mid-Broadwell Road that is closed to vehicular traffic shall conform to applicable city plans for the area. Now, as far as the city plans for what they're going to do with Mid-Broadwell, we understand that. For transportation plans, et cetera, what we're concerned about here is that language can be a little bit overreaching. And to the extent through this process, there has been a concept plan put together. While that is a good concept plan, we all know is the difference between a two-dimensional rendering and getting out and working, you come into things that are not going to work. So we just want that to be limited to things like the transportation plan or other concepts like that, and not a concept design plan that could be interpreted to force the property owner to build what the city tells them. As we all know, zoning concept is, here is a framework of what you are allowed to do, and you can do what you want within that, not you're going to build this. And that's just what we're trying to get at in that comment. We understand that the city is going to have certain plans within Mid-Broadwell, and we just want that to be limited to make sure there's no misunderstanding down the road. Secondly, in the section dealing with that are section 4.4.4 regarding specific aspects of the district at Mayfield, there are some language concerns regarding the number of principal buildings and how they are to be laid out. There is a concept that is in there that we're fine with, that if there's an existing building there on a lot, you can have a second principal building. That's fine. We understand that. There is a section of the property that was laid out on the concept plan that has 4 cottages, the residential component of this. As we're reading this language, we don't think that can be accomplished under the language in the ordinance, because, and this deals with frontage, and I think the intent of staff is good, and I talked to Ms. McDonald today, and I believe the intent is there, but the language doesn't work in that a building can be orientated towards a civic space, which is fine, and that's a good concept. However, that doesn't qualify as frontage, because your ordinance still requires every lot to have its own individual frontage. So for that purpose, we just don't think the language works. We think it can be modified, and we're happy to work with staff to do that. But again, we didn't want to bring this issue up in 2 weeks and try and amend an ordinance on the fly. We'd rather identify it now. And hopefully, if you all agree with those concepts, we can work with staff to get those accomplished. Thank you very
All right,
much.
thank you. Will you please call the next speaker?
Mayor, I invite Orion Roy to the podium.
Hello, my name is Orion Roy. I live at 2272 Trawick Chase. I just wanted to come out and voice my support for shortening the time period of elections. I'm a graduate of Cambridge High School. I participated in the community for some time. I've seen some of you when participating in elections, and I appreciate some of the support that I've had. So for hundreds of years, our nation has been able to participate and conduct elections without the use of machinery, and has been able to conduct them within a constrained time period with the ability to show the results in a very matter-of-fact way. And so if we can do it for hundreds of years up to this point, I think it is imperative that we are able to have the transparency for our constituents and other members of the community so that we can make sure that they have the trust in the institutions and the ability to know that their vote matters. As a university student, my professors prefer to use paper and pen and make sure that they are thoroughly watching as we take place in our, in our testing. So I don't see any reason for us to not participate and do so when conducting elections. Thank you.
Thank you. Will you please call the next speaker?
Mayor, I invite Matt Rowenzak to the podium, please.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Matt Rowenzak, 3001 Vickery Trace. I'm here tonight because despite all of the hard work done by the Election Feasibility Committee, staff, and City Council to run your own municipal elections this year, highly partisan groups just can't seem to help themselves. Fair Fight Action, the New Georgia Project Action Fund, Common Cause Georgia, and others had to attack this city by making baseless claims that it, quote, directly limits voting access, and that it, quote, is harmful. Where is the harm? The current plan by the city to have 2 election day voting locations does no such thing. If there was clear harm, then why do most other Georgia cities that run their municipal elections only use 1 location on election day? Are they going to attack those cities too? These groups also go on to say the city's decision must not result in, quote, exclusionary access to the ballot. So now, because a voting location isn't 2 miles closer to where they want it, then it is defined as excluding access to the ballot. Does that sound logical to you? In the letter they wrote to the city, they also mentioned the previous 8 voting locations, which is a model designed for statewide and federal elections. So now they're not comparing apples to apples. Does that sound logical to you? Not to mention the 8 locations are part of the Fulton County model that in 2020 went from 160 locations to 255, an almost 60% increase. Where we now have voting locations that are across the street from each other and may even share a parking lot. Does that sound logical to you? I'm pretty sure this city isn't trying to imitate the flawless elections of Fulton County. These highly partisan groups likely wouldn't be satisfied with just 1 more location, and they essentially tell you that in their letter by saying, quote, act swiftly to add additional location, open parentheses, S, close parentheses, implying adding more than 1 location is perfectly acceptable as well. I'll remind you, the founder of some of these partisan groups claims voter ID is discriminatory and that it is intended to, quote, scare people out of voting. Does that sound logical to you? Finally, I'd like to further address this false notion of a lack of voting access. First, in Georgia, in the Georgia election code, every voter is given the ability to take time off of work to vote, either on election day or during early voting? Is dedicated time off of work now insufficient? Secondly, how many days to vote are there? 19? I suppose if your spouse asked you to stop at the grocery store and you said, sorry, honey, I can't make it to the store for at least 19 days, it's just too far away. I'm sure he or she would sympathize with you and likely say, you're right, we just don't have enough access to the grocery store. Thirdly, I suppose the ability to place an absentee ballot in your mailbox just isn't convenient enough either. The idea that there isn't sufficient access to voting is a farce. To the 4 city council members who stood by the research, the data, and the facts presented, thank you very much for your sound decision-making.
Thank you. Will you please call the next speaker?
Mayor, I invite B. Rohr to the podium, please.
Hello, Mayor. Hello, City Council. I didn't realize I was actually going to be able to attend this session until about an hour ago, so I sat in my truck and wrote this note.
Excuse
It's
me,
not going to be
can-
sophisticated.
Sorry, can you please say your address for the record?
Oh, 12690 Bullpen Road. I've been in Milton for over 20 years.
Thank you.
Proud Miltonian. And so it's not a sophisticated remark, but it's coming from the heart. We in Milton have been following the process, the discussions, the debates regarding the city of Milton running its own elections. We are very pleased that the feasibility committee, the mayor and city council and city staff were committed to running a successful, efficient, cost-effective, fair election process. We are sure that this can be attained and City of Milton can stand proud in how it accomplished this aim. We have friends in Roswell, Johns Creek, and Alpharetta who definitely want the City of Milton to be successful so that they can run their elections too in their own cities, following and learning from Milton's example. The feasibility committee was meticulous in gathering and using actual election data and information. There were plenty of public comments given throughout the entire process. The mayor and city council and staff discussed, debated, and considered the feasibility committee recommendations, city staff recommendations, and the feedback from Milton citizens. After all of that study, deliberation, discussion, one was led to believe that the vote to approve item 23-110 at the last meeting for the city council would be a smooth and frictionless process. However, surprisingly, the mayor offered his own comments, citing his belief, not based on election data or information, that item 23-110 with its 2 voting locations would cause, quote unquote, divisions in our community. So with that derogatory preamble, the mayor proceeded to make a motion to pass 23-110 with an amendment to include 3 voting locations instead of the 2 locations that had been studied, discussed, debated ad nauseum. The mayor's motion did not pass, and item 23-110 was passed as originally discussed, debated, and recommended. What could have been a victory for the city and the Milton citizens regarding the establishment of a successful, efficient, and cost-effective election process was tarnished by the insertion of the mayor's divisive assertion regarding the measure. One can ask, why would the mayor of our lovely city of Milton do such a thing? Why would the mayor at the last minute insert a comment that had nothing to do with the study, the recommendations, public feedback, and comments that tarnished the entire process, which the feasibility committee, the mayor and city council, city staff, and Milton citizens had engaged in to establish our municipal elections? Why would this statement be made such that the vote to approve item 23-110 was cast in this dubious light, which was never an issue discussed in any of the presentations, recommendations, or debates? Why would a comment from the city's own mayor cast aspersions on the direction the city is taking to establish a successful, efficient, and cost-effective election. It's a great disappointment in city leadership, to say the least. We'll consider the answers to these questions in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Will you please call the next speaker?
I invite Kevin Muldowney to the podium.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Kevin Muldowney, 3325 Kentworth Lane, Milton, Crooked Creek subdivision. There's been a few articles in the press, and a left-wing lobbying group has claimed on Twitter racial injustice and black and brown voter suppression in Milton, Georgia. This is actually the same lobbying group that claimed widespread racial discrimination and statewide voter suppression in the last national election. The same election that saw Georgia end up with the highest minority voter participation in its history. Sounds like claims from a discredited organization trying desperately to stay relevant. The basis of this claim against Milton seems to be that having only 2 polling locations on election day will disenfranchise minority voters. A comparison was made to an election day model that featured a total of 8 voting locations on the single day previously known as Election Day. The reality is that even bloated, fat Fulton County was intent on reducing the number of election day polling locations as a result of ample early voting opportunities. There are other cities in Georgia running their own municipal elections, Peachtree Corners to be specific, comparably sized, that has always used only 1 polling location for early and election day voting with great success. If we feel we need to better accommodate the East Side voters on the final day of the election cycle, then by all means, make the 2 locations City Hall and the Milton Safety, what's it called? Milton Safety Complex on Highway 9. This will also give commuters better access to Georgia 400. Milton was founded on the premise of an efficient, fiscally responsible government delivering quality services to its citizens. Adding any more election day locations will only exemplify a bloated Fulton-esque model, with workers sitting around more concerned with collecting a paycheck than efficiently compiling and counting votes. Keep in mind, our goal is to run a proper election and not create a government work program. Thank you.
Thank you. Will you please call the next speaker?
I invite Brian Dunn to the podium.
Good evening. Brian Dunn, 220 Thistlewood Road, Lane, Roswell. I'd like to thank all the members of the council and mayor for the time and effort you put into making decisions for all in the community of Milton. You've been elected as bipartisan officials to represent the citizens of your city fairly. You've put forth considerable effort to break from the expensive Fulton County's control of Milton's municipal elections. You ordered a feasibility study and discovered the extensive cost savings such a move will make. The feasibility study showed that based on past turnout, 1 polling station for Milton is amply adequate. However, you advanced that for the benefit and convenience of the citizens so that 2 are in place. I want to address a concern I've learned about. You've received a letter from an organization as far as Fair Fight Action Group. They are critical of what they perceive as limited access for minority voters by not having 3 voting places in Milton. This seems to me ridiculous, a ridiculous statement. The feasibility study in history shows with more than 2 weeks of voting opportunities, 2 would be more than enough. If the polling locations are difficult in any way for Milton residents, they are able to mail their ballots from home or the local mail center. Many voters are accustomed to this method of voting. People of all cultures and nationalities have equal time and opportunity to vote if they choose. We all have free choice in this great country. Fair fight isn't fair. They appear to be a divisive partisan group pushing a false narrative and perhaps trying to bully and intimidate BOC members to continue to foster an atmosphere which promotes divisiveness, and that isn't there. They have no place to push this on our nonpartisan commissioners and mayors of our cities. I'd like to thank you for your consideration. As has been stated before, Milton is a leader in our area in taking this important step. Thank you.
Thank you. Will you please call the next speaker?
I invite Brett Cromie to the podium.
Brett Cromie, 14147 Seabiscuit, Milton resident. I'm here to support the original council decision stemming from the recommendations of the Milton Election Feasibility Committee. I surely didn't move, or better escape, from California to Georgia to get woke policies dictated to my town council from a Marxist organization like Fair Fight. I don't think you're threading the needle when you support the same things as that organization or any of the others that are trying to threaten or guilt you into changing your decision that was thoroughly and thoughtfully determined by your committee. There's no support for a weak, woke mayor or a woke council in Milton. Get your act together, Peyton, and start being a leader instead of enabling Milton to plunge into a ruined leftist future. Stick with the plan for 2 locations using paper ballots in the upcoming municipal election and stop catering to the very small number of radical fringe left that doesn't have a clue about how the majority of Milton residents want to live.
Thank you. Will you please call the next speaker?
Kevin Shigley, I invite you to the podium.
Good evening, I'm Kevin Shigley. I live at 15750 Milton, Hopewell Road, Milton. Thank you all for your service. I may be a little bit in the minority, but I'd like to just say a few words on behalf of the topic of voting and voting precincts. I realize that we've already made a decision to move forward with running our own elections, which, not sure how great a decision that is, but we'll see how that goes. I do think, to the extent that we can, it would be great to offer as many locations to people to vote as possible. I believe in, the civic opportunities. I think that Milton is a wonderful city, has wonderful people, and I think making it easy to vote is something we should do. So I would ask you to reconsider and perhaps put together one more location for our fine people of Milton. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Will you please call the next speaker?
Mayor, that concludes general public
Okay.
comment.
So I will close general public comment, and I'll ask the clerk to sound the consent agenda items.
Mayor, consent agenda item for tonight is item A, approval of the May 1st, 2023 regular city council meeting minutes. Agenda item number 23113. B is approval of the May 8th, 2023 work session meeting minutes. Agenda item number 23114. C is approval of the financial statements and investment report for the period ending November 2022. It's agenda item number 23115. Item D is approval of a professional services agreement between the City of Milton and Brumbelow Reese and Associates, Inc. for survey work related to Fire Station 45. Agenda item number 23116. E is approval of a construction services agreement between the City of Milton and IP Construction LLC for the Mayfield Road Sidewalk and Resurfacing Project. Agenda item number 23117. F is approval of a recreation provider agreement between the City of Milton and Rukshana Alam to provide a recreational Zumba program. Agenda item number 23118. G is approval of change order number 2 between the City of Milton and Cooper and Company General Contractors for the inclusion of piping systems replacement to the construction services agreement of the Milton Fire Station 42. Agenda item number 23119. Our final consent agenda H is approval of subdivision plats and revisions. The name of the development is Bell Park Preserve, located at 15285 Bell Park Drive. It's land lot 535, District 2, Section 2, a minor plat to subdivide the parcels into 3 tracts ranging in size from 1.413 acres to 1.569 acres, with a total of 4.518 acres and a density of 0.66 lots per acre. It's agenda item number 23120. Mayor?
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr.
Mayor,
Mayor,
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as read, number 23-120.
second.
I guess all the consent agenda.
Oh,
All the consent agenda as read.
Not just the one as read.
Okay, let's make sure. All right. So
Second.
I had a motion from Councilor Cookerly, a second from Councilor Morg to approve the consent agenda as read. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous. So we'll move on to reports and presentations. Will the city clerk please sound the first item?
That first item is a proclamation recognizing EMS Week. Mayor?
Thank you. So last week we had the honor to recognize our fine police department, and this week we get to honor our fine, want to make sure y'all are equal, fine fire department. I know y'all have a battle going on between the two of y'all. Y'all do fine work. Each and every one of us is proud of you. Everyone in this room is proud of you. All of our citizens are proud of you. And it's my honor to read this proclamation. Whereas EMS Week recognizes the more than 1 million paramedics and emergency medical technicians, or EMTs, nationally, who provide timely, critical, and often life-saving care to those in need. And whereas this celebration originated in 1974, when then President Gerald Ford signed legislation to shine a spotlight on emergency medical service providers and their contributions to our society. And whereas paramedics and EMTs are on the job 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, responding to 911 calls with the National EMS Assessment, counting 42.6 million such responses annually and nearly 31 million transports. And whereas, in addition to being frontline medical responders, EMS also care for chronic illnesses, offer preventive care, and provide health-related education to citizens. And whereas the Milton Fire Rescue Department consists of caring, talented, and knowledgeable men and women who do this in our community. And whereas every Milton firefighter is either an EMT or paramedic, meaning they have all specialized medical training and experience. And whereas there are numerous examples of Milton first responders saving lives, minimizing pain, duress, and health complications, and generally making a positive difference during medical emergencies. And whereas the increasingly impactful Milton Fire Cares program is a testament to the department's proactive, comprehensive commitment to the bringing healthcare and information to people in our city who need it. And now, therefore, we, the mayor and the city council of the city of Milton, recognize May 21st through the 27th as EMS Week and celebrate the outstanding paramedics and EMTs who serve our community, given under our hand and seal of the city of Milton, Georgia, on this 15th day, May of 2023.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I feel faint.
Thank you. Very fine. Am I honorable?
In there. We ready? Everyone back. Actually, you know what? Council, can you scoot over a little bit tilted? There we go. 3, 2. Got it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, will the city clerk please stay on the next item?
Mayor, item B is a proclamation recognizing Memorial Day 2023. Mayor Jameson?
Thank you. This next proclamation, I'm honored to read. I know every single year the city takes Memorial Day very seriously. It's a big deal. We have great volunteers who organize a wonderful event. It's always a welcome to the community, and we need to make sure we remember Memorial Day and what it stands for. So I'm honored to read this proclamation. Whereas Memorial Day is a meaningful annual opportunity in Milton and beyond to reflect and celebrate the now departed men and women who fought valiantly for our nation. And whereas the leader of a veterans organization first called for Decoration Day in May 1868 as a dedicated time to decorate graves of fallen Civil War troops with blooming flowers. And whereas 100 years later, Congress determined the Memorial Day holiday would occur nationwide every year on the last Monday of May. And whereas on this day, Americans remember the over 1 million Americans who died after battling for our nation's sake from the Revolutionary War, first shots through the 2 world wars, and during more recent conflicts in Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. And whereas Georgia and Milton in particular have been home to many such men and women who selflessly and honorably answered the call to fight for freedom. And whereas we vow to never forget the inspiring heroes who made the ultimate sacrifice, who helped make our country stronger and our lives better in countless ways. And whereas the city of Milton invites all to honor these fallen U.S. servicemen and women during a ceremony starting at 10 a.m. Monday, May 29th at the Green at Crabapple Market. Now, therefore, we, the mayor and the city council of the city of Milton, Georgia, hereby dedicate and proclaim Monday, May 29th, 2023 as Memorial Day in the city of Milton, and call this observance to the attention of all of our citizens. This is given under our hand and seal of the city of Milton, Georgia on this 15th day of May of 2023.
Those in attendance, you can come on down.
Yeah, they can stay up there. That works. And then let's see. Let's get
Shift over there.
shift over this way a little bit. And yeah, Bill, just move. Yep, you're good. Perfect. Perfect. 3, 2. Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, will the city clerk please stay on the next item?
Mayor, our next item is an update on Cox Road intersection improvements. Our Public Works Director, Ms. Sarah Leaders.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. Got a quick informational update on what's been going on the Cox Road intersection improvements tonight. So the objective is really just to provide information to you all ahead of us launching our public outreach, to give you a preview of what we're going to show for some feedback on concepts. So I'll quickly go through the history of the project, as well as the existing conditions at several of these intersections, the proposed project concepts, and next steps. So the Cox Road intersection improvements were identified on the T-SPLOS 2 project list for both Milton and the city of Roswell. And earlier this year, we approved an intergovernmental agreement with Roswell, where they're going to contribute 25% of the total cost, up to $1 million, for 2 of the locations. It's Cox Road at King Road and Cox Road at Ebenezer and Etris Road. And then a third intersection was identified at Cox Road at 140, as well as the impacts that that signal has on the commercial driveways that are in close proximity to that intersection. So that's a third location that we are looking at individually. We also have the potential to partnership with DOT on a future improvement at that location. So I'll start with the westernmost intersection, Cox Road at King Road. It's currently a three-way stop, and then you can see the crash history here, 13 in 5 years. And we are noting delay on Cox Road, both eastbound and westbound, relative to the morning and afternoon peak hours. The middle location, Ebenezer Etris at Cox Road, it's currently only the two side streets are stop controlled, and there is no stop on Cox Road. The crash history there is 10 in 5 years, including 2 minor injury accidents. That one, we noted some poor visibility due to the intersection angles, and we're seeing more delay on the side streets in the morning on this intersection location. The third one is currently signalized, and just wanted to point out, State Route 140 has a significantly higher volume than Cox Road. We counted about, I think there's 25,000 cars a day on 140. So we would expect to see a higher accident rate here, but the crash history is 51 in 5 years, 13 with injuries. I mentioned the commercial driveways that are in close proximity. We have the driveway into Legacy Park, we have the driveway to the Porter Academy, and then the driveways for the Ebenezer Methodist Church. Did want to point out the Porter Academy driveway has had a history of crashes as well. This section of Cox Road and intersection does have congestion in both the morning and afternoon peaks. And one thing to mention here is any improvements we do that touch the state route would have to involve Georgia DOT. So the concepts we're looking to get some feedback on from the public as well as stakeholders are similar for two of the locations. We looked at a roundabout layout as well as turn lanes with traffic signalization. So this is what Cox Road at King could look like. Again, these are very preliminary, and we're hoping just to show these to the public and get some feedback. These are the same two style concepts for Etris Ebenezer. One is a roundabout, and the other is the associated required turn lanes as well as signalization. There is some realignment, a little more with the signal to get that approach to come in more 90 degrees. The roundabout, the approach can kind of work with the how the roundabout is laid out. Again, very preliminary on the proposed side. And then the driveway access, as well as looking at Cox Road at 140. The option on the left is, it's a version of a Florida T or a high T where there's a divided median, and northbound 140 would be able to continue moving. They wouldn't have to stop for Cox Road, so there'd be less delay when that turn is given a green signal. So it would still be signalized, and the left turn would have a receiving lane that would have to merge further to the north. In both of these, we are looking at some interparcel connectivity between some of the driveways for Porter Academy as well as Legacy Park. The park driveway is very close to the signal. And so to make it just a right in, right out, and to have the full access shared with Porter Academy. The other option is changing the turn lanes, so making the outside lane either a left or a right, so it would provide dual left movement from Cox Road onto 140 to be able to get more cars through. So we plan to launch our public outreach tomorrow. We have a web page devoted to the project with lots of information, background, project descriptions. We have a communications plan to put out the word about the outreach opportunities. We're going to be meeting with Porter Academy staff and parents tomorrow morning. We're going to be launching a survey for the whole outreach period of May 16th through the 26th. As part of that, we also have what's called a social pinpoint site. It allows those that want to interact with the concepts to place points and list notes and comments related to the proposals. And lastly, we're going to have a public meeting on Saturday, May 20th at Legacy Park to catch those that are at the park as well as anyone else that wants to stop by during that time. And lastly, we'll wrap up all this outreach, the comments we received, provide you some more information on the concepts as well as the traffic and accident data in June or July. And be glad to answer any questions.
Questions for Sarah? No. Sounds good. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks.
Okay, we'll move on to first presentations. Will the city clerk please say on the items?
Mayor, item A is consideration of RZ 23-01, Article 19, Crabapple Form-Based Code, as it relates to possible amendments related to the district at Mayfield and other related topics of the Crabapple Form-Based Code. It is agenda item number 23121. Mayor?
Thank you. Do I have a motion on the first presentation items?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion that we accept or approve the first presentation as read. Second.
All right, I have a motion from Councilor Moore and a second from Councilor Moore to approve the first presentation items as read. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That's unanimous. Okay, there are no public hearing items. Moving on to the zoning agenda. Will the city clerk please read the zoning rules and sound the first item?
Thank you, Mayor. The zoning rules for tonight, when a mayor and council consider a zoning agenda, these items include rezoning petitions, modifications of zoning, use permits, and associated concurrent variances. In addition to ordinances, resolutions, and text amendments, I would like to acquaint you with some of the rules and procedures for this meeting, which includes a zoning agenda. The applicant and all those speaking in support of an application will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present the petition. The opposition will also be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present its position. If time remains, the opposition will be allowed to rebut. The applicant may choose to save some time for rebuttal following the presentation by the opposition. Since the burden of proof is upon the applicant will be allowed to make closing remarks, provided time remains. Those called to speak will be taken in the order in which the speaker cards were received. All speakers will identify themselves with name, address, and organization, and if applicable, an affidavit for the organization before beginning the presentation. The Planning Commission has heard the rezoning agenda items, and their recommendations have been forwarded to the mayor and council for consideration and disposition. The applicant shall not submit material to the council during this meeting unless requested to do so. All material that you wish to be reviewed by the council in consideration of your application should have already been submitted to the Community Development Department and is included in the normal distribution of packages to council. When an opponent of a rezoning action has made within a 2-year period immediately preceding the filing of the rezoning action being opposed, campaign contributions aggregating $250 or more to a local government official of the local government which will consider the application, it shall be the duty of the opponent to file a disclosure with the governing authority of the respective local government at least 5 days prior to the Planning Commission meeting. A violation of relevant state statute constitutes a misdemeanor. Therefore, if you have contributed $250 or more to a council member and you have not filed a disclosure prior to the Planning Commission meeting, the city attorney strongly suggests that you have someone else speak for your point of view. Our first zoning item this evening is consideration of U-2204, located at 3100 Heritage Walk, Suite 301. It's Zone T5, Crabapple Form-Based Code by Something Weddings and Events, LLC, to request a use permit for Assembly Hall Indoor Auditorium not to exceed 150 attendees within 4,000 square feet on the 3rd floor of the building. Our Community Development Department, it is agenda item number 23102. Michael Cardeman.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The address is 3100 Heritage Walk, Suite 301. Use permit request U-2204 Assembly Hall Indoor Auditorium, Section 641846. After the January 25th Planning Commission meeting, it was discovered that the address of 3000 Heritage Walk was incorrect, and after consulting with the city attorney, it was decided to go through the process again. The applicant is Something Wedding and Events, LLC by Lisa Chandler. The size is 3.85 acres. The existing use is a 3-story mixed-use building under construction. The request is for a use permit to operate an Assembly Hall Indoor Auditorium not to exceed 150 attendees within 4,000 square feet on the 3rd floor of a 3-story mixed-use building currently under construction. Location map showing an aerial of the northeastern quadrant of Birmingham Highway and Heritage Walk. Zoning map detailing the current zoning. While the entire building at 3100 Heritage Walk is located in T5 zoning, the subject site is split between T5 zoning and T4 open zoning. Site plan submitted on November 29th, 2022. Location of the 3-story mixed-use building under construction is highlighted in yellow. Here's page 2 of the site plan showing the T4 open zone and the other side of the development. Here are the elevations submitted on November 29th, 2022. Background and request. The applicant plans to open a high-end wedding and event venue business in this space. Meals, if provided, will be by a licensed catering service, and no cooking will happen on site. The majority of the facility will be an open ballroom space, able to have a ceremony and then be changed into a seated reception area with a dance floor. Amplified music will only be played inside the facility, and the events are expected to be primarily on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Originally, the applicant had Fulton County School Board support to use adjacent nearby schools for parking, but the applicant was informed by FCSB that they no longer have permission to park at these facilities after learning that they were serving alcohol. Based on no longer having the above option, the applicant has signed a parking agreement with Silo's Professional Building located at 12385 Crabapple Road in Alpharetta, as stated at the April 26th Planning Commission meeting. There will be 92 additional parking spaces, and the plan is to shuttle guests in from the parking area to 3100 Heritage Walk. Here's a graphic detailing the travel path from the shuttle service for the guests to the Silo's Professional Building. The Planning Commission recommendation from the January 25th meeting was unanimous for approval. There was no one in attendance at the meeting in support or in opposition. There was a discussion regarding the amount of parking available for the proposed venue to an off-site location. The valet service was later withdrawn and replaced with a parking agreement with the Silo's Professional Building, which I've referenced in the previous slides. The Planning Commission recommended an additional condition to further ensure adequate parking availability within the development. In addition, the Planning Commission recommended to remove the applicant's proposed more restrictive days and hours of operation and to replace them with the use permit days and hours of operation. Staff has provided these details, which are highlighted in yellow at the end of the presentation within the recommended conditions. The Planning Commission recommendation from the April 26th meeting was also unanimous for approval, just as it did at the January meeting. On April 5th, the applicant was present at the Community Zoning Information Meeting held at City Hall at 7 p.m. There was no one in attendance regarding this item. April 11th, Design Review Board Courtesy Review. 5 of the DRB members present at the meeting expressed support for the use and recommended approval of the use permit, while also acknowledging they stand behind their approval recommendation from the January 3rd meeting. The applicant was working on a valet service and rideshare to address the removal of the FCSB parking. The valet service was later replaced with the Silo's Professional Building Park Agreement. The DRB believes there is ample parking opportunities around this area in the future Reliant Building parking deck to be located at the northwest corner of Heritage Walk and Mayfield Road could potentially alleviate future parking concerns if the applicant was looking for other avenues of parking in the future. The applicant held a public participation meeting on April 18th at City Hall Community Place from 7 to 8 p.m. One citizen expressed concern with the noise and asked if the venue would have roll-up doors, open windows, and outdoor speakers. The applicant explained to the citizen that the venue will not have roll-up doors, not have open windows, and outdoor amplified music as prohibited in the city ordinance. The citizen was satisfied with this response. The existing building meets all development standards as required in T5 Transect Zone. Site plan considerations and the Assembly Hall Indoor Auditorium use permit definition. A building or portion of a building for public rental for the purpose of private events, whether family, group, or corporate in nature, where access by the general public is restricted, and with or without the sale, serving, or consumption of food and or alcoholic beverages. An Assembly Hall Indoor Auditorium shall not include a restaurant. Here are the site plan considerations for section 641846, and the applicant meets these requirements. And I want to point out that the applicant is requesting a maximum of 150 attendees. The proposed development is in the T5 land use category of the City of Milton 2040 Comprehensive Plan map in the Crabapple Form-Based Code. The proposed use permit for an assembly hall and auditorium is permitted within the T5 Transect Zone. In addition, the adopted 2040 Comprehensive Plan states that T5 Urban Center consists of higher density mixed-use buildings that accommodates retail, offices, row houses, and apartments. In addition, wide sidewalks, street tree plantings, and buildings are close to the sidewalks. Therefore, the proposed use is consistent with the land use plan adopted by the mayor and city council based on the fact that the proposed use is located within a building development that is consistent with this recommended development pattern. While the entire building at 3100 Heritage Walk is located in T5 zoning, the 3.85 acre site for the Market District of Crabapple is split between T5 zoning and T4 open zoning. The subject site is compatible with adjacent nearby zoning and land uses, which include a mix of retail, offices, including both general and medical related, services, and include a salon, coffee shop, physical therapy business, and restaurants. These uses are located within the T5 Transect Zone. The location to the south across Heritage Walk and to the west across Birmingham Highway are all Zone T5 Transect Zone and are developed as office uses and gardens. To the east is T4 open zoning, which is currently under development, and even farther to the east is the Lakeside of Crabapple subdivision. And finally, to the north is the Civic Building Site zoning and the location of Crabapple Crossings Elementary. The proposed use does not appear to violate any ordinance or regulations governing land development. Since the streets and sidewalks already exist and were designed to accommodate the number and size of mixed-use buildings, there will be a minimal effect on the traffic flow, vehicular and pedestrian, along the adjoining streets. The 296 parking spaces shown on pages 1 and 2 of the site plan are located within the entire mixed-use development. This includes 194 surface parking spaces, 94 structured parking spaces, 8 on-street parking spaces. There are no specific parking standards for this use, but the general requirement within form-based code is 3.5 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet. The 4,000 square feet space would require 14 parking spaces. In order to help ameliorate parking issues, the applicant has signed a parking agreement with Silos Professional Building located at 12385 Crabapple Road in Alpharetta. And additionally, event packages will provide attendees with rideshare vouchers. Based on the applicant's plan for parking, it appears there will be sufficient parking for this use. The proposed use was in an existing building that is part of an overall mixed-use development that contains 3.85 acres that has provided the required minimum open space of 5% with 11,375 square feet of open space on site. And the open space is located on the farthest corner of the development. The proposed use is an existing building that is part of an overall mixed-use development that does not require any protective screening, as the form-based code does not require screening between uses or parcels in this area. The applicant has indicated they will comply with the hours and manner of operation required with the standards of the use permit. The proposed use is within a building under construction as part of an overall mixed-use development, which has been approved by the city through the land disturbance permit process, including required lighting on the site. The building under construction is located at the northeast side of Birmingham Highway and Heritage Walk intersection. This is an existing full access onto Heritage Walk that provides sufficient access to the property. In conclusion, the proposed Assembly Hall Indoor Auditorium use permit is consistent with the City of Milton 2040 Comprehensive Plan and map and consistent with the use permit considerations. Therefore, staff recommends approval conditional of U-2204. If the petition is approved by Mayor and City Council, it should be for a use permit for an Assembly Hall Indoor Auditorium, Section 641846, for the following conditions. To the owner's agreement to restrict the use of the subject property as follows. Restrict the use of an Assembly Hall Indoor Auditorium. Restrict the total square footage to 4,000 square feet. Restrict the maximum number of attendees to 150. The applicant proposed more restrictive days and hours of operation. However, the Planning Commission recommended to remove the applicant's proposed more restrictive days and hours of operation and to replace them from the standard use permit. 2A, the owner's agreement to abide by the following substantial compliance with the site plan received by Community Development Department on November 29th, 2022. And lastly, 2B, which was a condition added by the Planning Commission. The applicant shall provide either off-site parking or transportation option to facilitate rides such as the total number of additional parking spaces and transportation options actually utilized shall be at least 0.5 parking spaces per attendee over 30 attendees. Any questions or comments?
Any questions before public comment?
Not before.
Okay. Do we have any public comment?
Not on this item, sir.
Okay, so no support or no opposition.
Have none.
That might be a first for a zoning, so I will close public comment and I will open it for questions or, any discussion.
I just had a real quick question. How does this square footage of this facility and maximum capacity compare to what we've approved for the rooftop over here over Savvy Provisions?
The provision square footage of the whole area?
The rooftop space, the rental space above, how does the square footage compare with the maximum capacity?
I would need to look it up. I don't have it off the top of my head. So you want me to do that? I can do that.
It's fine. I was just curious
It's
to see if
fairly
they were similar.
comparable.
Okay.
I mean, I believe that theirs was at 175 and they have the top floor of their building as well. So
Square
it's
footage
not
is a little.
hugely larger. but
Okay.
Councilmember Moore?
Is the 4,000 square feet the entire footprint of the third floor? Or is there another?
Yes.
There's no other event or business on that floor?
Correct. They take the entire third floor.
Okay, and there's no intention to use rooftop in this location. It'll be contained entirely by the third floor.
Correct. I think we spoke to them that obviously if somebody wants to go up and get a breath of fresh air or whatever, but there shouldn't be any organized activities on the rooftop.
No seating,
No seating.
umbrellas, no. Okay.
And the applicant is here if you want to ask questions.
But
about
they can certainly amend the questions being proposed to staff if we miss something or get something wrong. I'm happy to listen to them too. Do we know about hours of operation for deliveries outside the intended operation hours of the events?
So it would just default to the use permit, which I believe is 7:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. Monday through Sunday through Thursday, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and Friday and Saturday, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m.
Okay, and
I'm sorry. Deliveries, I was right. Sunday through Saturday, 7:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. I shouldn't read things. I should just.
And have we resolved the issue in other parts of Crabapple where there were deliveries for other types of businesses where the delivery vehicles were found to be idling hours before the delivery? The delivery is taking place within those hours, but there were vehicles, significant trucks, diesel trucks idling from maybe 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. waiting for the delivery. Have we resolved that in Crabapple?
Oh, if that's been reported as a code enforcement issue, if Bob has heard that.
I thought that issue really came up as a result of those commercial operations being
Yeah, it was
adjacent
restaurants
to
primarily.
residential.
Yeah.
This one here, there are no residential immediately surrounding the location.
I would just ask that we contemplate that as we're looking at it, so we don't create a problem we hadn't anticipated. And then for the operation of the facility itself, I'm assuming a lot of the assets, tables, chairs, those kinds of things will remain on site. It's not like they come and go between events. So there's not additional deliveries for those kinds of
That
equipment.
would be a question for the applicant specifically.
Then the last question, this is for staff. Because this is an unusual circumstance where we're transporting people from one location to the parking area to the location. It's the first of its kind where I think we're addressing that. And it looks like the proposed transportation plan is to stay on Heritage Drive to Mayfield. Have we contemplated any restriction to ensure that that kind of business transportation remains on the primary roads and not use secondary roads through the neighborhoods when they're during busy times? We request that they at least request, if not require, them to stay on the major thoroughfare.
We haven't, but I think it's an excellent comment and we should we should definitely amend it to include that, because that's the intent.
Okay,
The very
maybe we just
intent.
ask the applicant to come up and address some of those questions.
We need to open up public comment again. If we do that, if the applicant comes up, are we okay?
Just for questions, that's fine.
Okay. The applicant will please come up.
Bernadette found it, it's 101 people and 2,900. 900 of the patio, so it's.
If you'll please state your name and address for the record.
Craig and Lisa Chandler, 73 Sagamore Court, Dallas, Georgia.
Great, thanks for being here tonight. Look forward to you guys introducing this to Milton. I think it's going to be a great asset, and I think what a wonderful way to bring some vitality to our downtown area with something different than what we've known before. So we certainly appreciate all the cooperation you've generated with the city to get to this point. So if I can just go back to a couple of my earlier questions, it sounds like you guys have contemplated all these things anyway. So the delivery issue, you can comply with normal business hours for deliveries. There's nothing else extraordinary that would come outside those normal business hours.
Yeah, we'll be completely in compliance with the ordinances and their hours of operation.
Great, thank you. And primarily, it's just going to be food deliveries because most of the assets would already be on site, tables, chairs, those kinds
Primarily
of
food, yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Anything that I haven't thought about that would be deliveries that you might introduce to the
Food and
discussion?
flowers.
Okay. And then how about your willingness to cooperate with the suggestion that you stay on the primary thoroughfare and not go into the residential area when using your shuttle buses going to and from?
Absolutely.
No
It's the
issue.
shortest trip and it saves us money to stay on.
Certainly, it would be more efficient. Obviously, in some instances, we want to make sure that we protect the residential
Yes.
community from a commercial operation if we can. Great, if you're willing to cooperate, that sounds good.
I have a question. Who thought of the name?
I did.
Very cute.
Yes.
Well done.
Any questions for the applicant? Anybody else? No? Thank you. We're looking forward to it.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay. Then I will open it for a motion.
Mayor, I make a motion that we approve agenda item number 23-102.
Second?
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Cookerly and a second from Councilmember Moore to approve agenda item number 23-102. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. We'll move on to unfinished business. Will City Clerk please stay on the item?
Mayor, item A is consideration of an ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Milton, Georgia, to adopt amendments to the fiscal year 2023 budget for each fund of the city of Milton, Georgia, amending the amounts shown in each budget as expenditures, amending the several items of revenue anticipations, prohibiting expenditures to exceed appropriations, and prohibiting expenditures to exceed actual funding available. It is agenda item number 23-103. Our Assistant City Manager, Ms. Bernadette Harville.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. On May 1st, we had a detailed presentation during the public hearing on the proposed amendments to fiscal year 2023's budget. I will present a shorter summary presentation this evening with a focus on the general fund, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about any of the proposed amendments. In the general fund, we are recognizing updated revenue projections based on activity to date and that are anticipated through year end. These amendments include more substantial changes to current year property tax revenues based on the city's floating homestead exemption, being offset by the recognition of Milton's share of the local option sales tax distribution for FY 2023, as well as anticipated investment income earnings. The proposed revenue amendments equal $2,462,236. There is a request to transfer the majority of those funds as well as fund balance in excess of Milton's required reserves, which is a result of revenues coming in higher than anticipated last year, as well as staff's conservative spending, to the Capital Projects Fund. This $3,440,696 transfer request seen here will go towards the construction and outfitting of Fire Station 45. If approved, Fire Station 45 project will be fully funded through Milton's PAYGO program according to the most recent project cost estimates. The total expenditure amendment request, including this transfer, is $3,544,696. If the proposed amendments are adopted and the budgeted fund balance in the general fund is projected to be $11,370,785, which is in line with Milton's fund balance policy to maintain 25% of the subsequent year's revenues in reserves. And that is based on our projected revenues for fiscal year 2024 using the city's 5-year operating forecast. The remaining amendments recognize spending and appropriation changes in the Confiscated Assets Fund, the Capital Projects Fund, Green Space Bond Fund, T-SPLOST Fund, and the Capital Grant Fund that we discussed in detail at our public hearing back on May 1st. I'll be happy to go over any other of the detailed amendments or answer any questions to Jeff.
Questions for Bernadette? Okay, do we have any public comment?
We do not, Mayor.
Okay, so I will close public comment and open it for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve agenda item number 23-103.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Jacobus and a second from Councilmember Morg to approve agenda item number 23-103. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to new business. Will the city clerk please sound the item?
Mayor, that new business item A is consideration and possible direction regarding modifying the city's personal transportation vehicle PTV code. It is agenda item number 23-122. Our city attorney, Mr. Ken Gerard.
Mr. Mayor, before we begin any discussion this evening, this is getting old, but my apologies due to pending litigation. I've been advised by my counsel that I excuse myself from participating again this evening.
Thank you. Councilmember Moore, City Attorney Ken Gerard.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you very much. I do have a PowerPoint presentation. It is important that you believe that I have the capacity to do one. I very rarely have done one, but this is going to be my moment. So I'm looking forward to having that in front of you. So this evening, we're going to go over, I've got a few slides, mainly because I want to orient the council on what we're talking about. At the last meeting when this was discussed, there was quite a bit of discussion about the city's PTV ordinance. And really where it left was me indicating that I would go and take a look at some of the other jurisdictions that have personal transportation vehicle codes and how they reference and integrate into them the concept of golf carts. And so that is what I'm going to do today, but I thought it might be helpful for all of us if I give you just a little bit of an overview of some of this. So that is the objective this evening. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So first of all, just a little bit of history. The notion of this PTV concept really came about in 2011 when the General Assembly adopted a statute with respect to PTVs. And I have in my mind what I believe is the reason that the General Assembly finally acted on this issue. I won't really go into that. I don't know that it's appropriate for me to begin to opine on what I thought the General Assembly was doing, but irrespective of why, they did. And so in 2011, we were introduced to this new concept of the personal transportation vehicle under Georgia law. And this is sort of what that code looked like when it was adopted. We can go to the next slide very quickly. And as it has sort of since 2012, this is what it looks like today. And the definition as codified in state law in Title 41 has sort of two definitional sections. There's an A and a B, very typical statutory device. Each of them is a standalone definition. So A really doesn't have any applicability to Milton. A is what I would consider to be a typical grandfathering language, and that's talking about jurisdictions that had ordinances that allowed these types of vehicles to operate prior to 2012. And if you were to ask me, give me a specific example, I would say it'd be Peachtree City would be the quintessential example of where A was attempting to sort of grandfather the notion of these. Peachtree City actually calls them motorized carts. And they would be grandfathering. But for everybody else, including Milton, B is where we look. And of course, B is the traditional definition of PTV that everybody that didn't have the grandfathering would use. If we can go to the next slide, please, Tammy. All right, so then state law said, all right, so we're going to use this notion of a personal transportation vehicle, and if you're a Peachtree City, that's fine. Your definition is a little more lax than if you don't, and we don't have that. But the notion is we are going to authorize governments throughout Georgia, all governments, to adopt TTV plans. And there was going to be a plan for separate PTV lanes, which you see in AC1. I highlighted and underlined it. So you could have sort of separate PTV lanes, or go to the next slide, the notion of these joint usage. In other words, they would literally be sharing space with cars, and that's more of what I guess I would say the Milton centric vision is going to be. So again, this is just a brief history. If you don't mind, go to the next slide. But as opposed to those entities that were grandfathered, PTVs that were adopted, or codes that were adopted post 2012, the requirements for PTVs were fairly stringent. And I want you to be thinking of a concept, because you're going to see this later, but the notion of basically street legal is what I want to concept I want to focus on, street legal. And you'll see, even in this excerpt of the statute, you'll see the B at the bottom, that the requirements of A don't apply to personal transportation vehicles operated during daylight hours authorized by local ordinances enacted prior to January 1st, 2012. And again, that's not us. So we are in fact bound by A. And so our PTVs, whether they're called golf carts, whether they're called motorized carts, whatever you want to call them, they have to have that safety features on them to be able to be, quote unquote, street legal. All right, so next slide. So using that, leveraging, if you will, that state law, in 2020, the city of Milton did in fact take advantage of it and adopted its own PTV ordinance. And here's just an excerpt from that definition, nothing unusual. In fact, you've already seen that because we basically just mimicked the state statute. Okay, so that's what we did. Next slide, please. And if, again, mimicking the state code as we have to, we indicated that our personal transportation vehicles to operate on city streets in Milton have to have all of these safety features, safety apparatus attached to them to make them, in my language, street legal. Next slide. Under the city's code, PTVs are allowed on streets that meet the following criteria. And again, if you were to juxtapose this against the state statute, you would find that it's basically lifted word for word. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we're getting to the nuts and bolts of what I think the objective of this evening was, at least from my perspective. The city of Milton's code contains no reference to either the legal term golf cart or the colloquial term golf cart. It's just not referenced. So from a state law perspective, the phrase PTV and golf cart, they're not interchangeable. From a state law perspective, it's important that we keep that in mind from a state law. Under state law, the term golf cart means a vehicle uniquely designed to only operate on a golf course, and therefore would not be a street legal PTV. However, and this is where I think the council was getting to, and again, dangerous thing for me to begin to where the council was getting to, because the council is composed of, in this case, 6 individual persons, and you may have your own thoughts on what you're attempting to get to. However, attempting to read the tea leaves, this is where I think you're getting to. In the 2019-2020 discussion, we were debating the PTV code. We used those terms, golf cart and PTV, pretty interchangeable. And we just did. And I think that you can see references to that on the video. Moreover, several jurisdictions, all of which you will know, have included references to golf carts in their PTV code. And this is in my belief, this is me speaking, but I believe it is a means of aiding citizens in understanding the concept. Almost everybody knows what a golf cart is. I mean, right now, if I ask you to picture one in your head right now, you probably can do that. But what a PTV is not as readily understandable. That is a defined concept of the General Assembly. A golf cart is a traditional concept that has been with us sort of organically, well, probably since the advent of golf courses and vehicles to drive around them. Go to the next slide. And so this was just something putting together very quickly So the city of Milton's golf cart code, again, doesn't reference golf carts. But just a quick online tour of just online ads. The notion of these open air vehicles that can be operated legally on the streets are still referred to as golf carts. I mean, that's true. And in fact, even now, they're called street legal golf carts, I think is interesting. And so I just pulled a couple of ads that took like, 7 nanoseconds to find. So very quick slide. So this is what you then asked me to do. You asked me to take a look at some of the jurisdictions and see what they had done with the concept of this colloquial definition of golf carts, the traditional definition. I'm not talking really about the state law definition. I'm talking about the normal customary usage, the way people like in real life speak. And so I've got a couple of these municipal jurisdictions. Flowery Bridge, in 2018, they adopted this code. Here's their personal transportation vehicle code, their definition. And it has a parenthetical. It says to include golf carts meeting definition, which I think is the way that lawyer put that together, meaning to meet the definition of the PTV and maintaining all the equipment standards in section 4774. You're going to see that sort of way of sort of getting at this issue a few times. Next slide, please. Here's Roswell 2015. Personal transportation vehicle defined, parenthetical, to include golf carts meeting the definition. So everybody that's drafting this is being careful to say that golf carts in the colloquial sense to fit under the PTV definition has to have the safety stuff, has to have all the appendages of state law, which is technically correct. Woodstock has a little bit of a different variation. I live near Woodstock. I don't live in Woodstock, but I live near it. And they actually, their code is called PTV or personal transportation vehicles and modified golf carts. So again, the way they sort of address this issue is to call it a PTV and modified golf cart. You know what the modification is? Modification is safety equipment. That's what the modification is. And that's how Woodstock sort of dealt with this same issue. Next slide, please. In Canton, again, taking another very pragmatic. Those PTVs means all electric and gasoline powered pleasure carts, spin on the language, which are commonly called and referred to as golf carts. And then keep going to the next slide with Canton. Thank you, Tammy, again. And again, they're very clear though that it has to have that safety equipment. So everybody's staying in the lanes. Everybody that's doing this that I have looked at has stayed within the lanes. Yeah, and this is again, one more. Thank you, Tammy. And that was Duluth 2021, so fairly recently, but again, just wash, rinse, repeat. Same thing, personal transportation vehicle, parenthetical, to include golf carts meeting definition. Last, so the council asked that I review some of our neighboring jurisdictions to ascertain whether other jurisdictions have built into their code a historical reference to golf carts. I've now showed that to you. Yes, some of them have. This is me speaking to you now. Again, I'm in PowerPoint here, so I'll just read. The fact that they reference the term golf cart does not mean that they are allowing unauthorized vehicles to operate on city streets. Rather, the reference to golf carts in these jurisdictions appears to be a historical reference or connotation point to alert citizens that those devices that have historically been described as golf carts may operate on city streets so long as they are modified with such additional safety equipment as will render them street legal. So, from my perspective, what these other jurisdictions have done is simply a function of clarifying the intent of the jurisdiction and perhaps providing maybe a more user-friendly thing that is easily understandable by the reviewer. Last slide, if it may be it. Yeah, okay, so I may have gotten ahead of my skis, maybe not. I'm sure you'll be happy to tell me, but I did go ahead and just add some language into our code that seems to me to be consistent with what some of these other jurisdictions have done. Mayor, the council has not given me the authority to do this, but I put it together for purposes of simply just aiding in this discussion this evening. But this is language in our code. Obviously, the red language is what we would add should you choose to do it. And that would be basically sort of mimicking this thought process of the other jurisdictions. I fulfilled what you wanted me to do. This is my overview. This matter is now to you. We're not adopting anything tonight. The only objective I have is for you to tell me if you want me to put this into a codified version, and then we'll bring it back to the first presentation. Have to have a second. Mr. Mayor.
Any questions before public comment? Okay. How many public comment cards do we have?
9.
Okay. Please call the first speaker.
I invite Kathy Kreisman to the podium.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kathy Christman, and I reside at 530 Trayburn View, Milton, Georgia. I've lived in the same neighborhood in Milton since 1999, several years before incorporation. My neighborhood declaration stated then and states now that we do not allow golf carts, yet I'm starting to see them on our shaded, curvy streets shared with vehicles who often travel over the speed limit of 25 miles per hour. The folks driving these vehicles, whether they are called PTVs or golf carts, say they have the right to do so because of Milton's new PTV ordinance. I disagree. Our governing documents have remained intact for my 23 years here until the city interfered by introducing a poorly worded ordinance. So thank you, Mr. Gerard, for your slideshow, but I'm touching on something a little different here. I've watched several archived council work sessions and meetings from the past few years. The conclusion by many previous council members, the former mayor, and some of you present here tonight is that your intent with this new PTV ordinance was not to interfere with any HOA's governing documents. Yet that is exactly what you have done. In his March 6th letter, the city attorney stated, and I quote, "In adopting the PTV ordinance, it was not the intention of the city council to invalidate or render unenforceable the private neighborhood covenants pertaining to the PTV usage," end quote. We asked the city council to fulfill the pledge you made to not interfere with our HOA's ability to enforce our covenants. We are asking you to do this by doing what our neighboring cities have done, by simply clearing up the language in your ordinance to be more transparent and specific, such as acknowledging the traditionally used meaning of the term golf cart. This ordinance will have an impact on many neighborhoods throughout the city, not just mine. So we need to get the wording correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Will you please call the next speaker?
I invite Mel Levine to the podium.
Thank you for your time. You stole some of my thunder. My name is Mel Levine. I live at 890 Hampton Bluff Drive in Milton. I've been there, July will be 28 years. I was the 7th resident in White Columns. The other 6 are gone. I don't like to say I'm the oldest person there, but I am the longest tenured resident. As such, I'm asking Milton to bring its PTV ordinance into alignment with those of surrounding cities. These cities acknowledge the natural confusion from the continued common use of the term golf cart applied to motorized carts used for any purposes. In the September 16, 2019 council work session, Chief Austin said the state law is convoluted at best, so it's been left up to local communities to regulate golf carts. At least 8 surrounding communities, as well as others around the state, have done just that and cleared up this confusing, convoluted language by harmonizing golf cart and PTV language into their ordinance. These include Canton, Calhoun, Cherokee County, Johns Creek, Flowery Branch, Duluth, Monroe, Roswell, Hawkinsville, and also our immediate neighbor, Alpharetta, prohibits PTVs for safety concerns. What do these ordinances say? In Canton, it means all electric and gasoline-powered pleasure carts, which are commonly called and referred to as golf carts. Within this article, the terms personal transportation vehicle, golf cart, and cart shall have the same meanings. Cherokee County's ordinance mirrors that of Canton. Calhoun defines PTV characteristics and then adds the words such vehicles may also be traditionally referred to as golf carts. Johns Creek defines PTV characteristics and then adds the term does include golf carts. Duluth Roswell, Flowery Branch define personal transportation vehicles to include golf carts meeting the definition. The White Column's current HOV covenants explicitly exclude the use of golf carts and would have included the terms PTV had they existed when those were done in 1994 and 95. Though there have been always been a few people interested in golf carts in our community, but in my 28 years at White Columns and the 5 years I spent as the HOA vice president, the vast majority of residents rejected them, especially in the golf section of White Columns, which would be disproportionately impacted by these vehicles. I'm not asking you to do anything other than recognize that our municipal neighbors have already evaluated this issue and concluded that PTVs and golf carts should be defined as a single genre. Milton should not be an outlier based upon the desire of a few trying to use this council to circumvent a 28-year-old HOA covenant because they cannot get the required number of residents to overrule. Residents have the ability, the HOA has the ability to get the residents to revise the covenant, and that they have not been successful in that. So I think that indicates that a vast majority of our residents would prefer if the council doesn't take actions that overrule our covenants. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Will you please call the next speaker?
Rebecca Jones, I invite you to the podium.
I reside at 705 Hampton Trace Lane in White Columns, and I've been a resident there for 25 years. Thank you for having me. So interfering in HOAs has been a central topic in the PTV amendment discussions, despite the mayor and the city manager and some council repeatedly saying that they don't want to get involved. And our HOA board and a handful of PTV proponents repeatedly hammering that council should not get involved. The reality is that the city already has directly interfered in our HOA in the PTV issues, not once, but twice. Most recently is a passage of the PTV ordinance that puts in question our ability to enforce our 29-year-old covenant prohibiting golf carts. The first time you got involved was 4 years ago before the ordinance was crafted and may shed some light on how we got here. Intentional or not, that involvement was a scheme initiated by one resident to force golf carts onto our private street section streets by pushing you to pass a city ordinance to put them on public streets in our non-gated sections. Quoting from 2019 public record emails, out of respect, I have redacted names. City council member to city manager, copying pro PTV resident, hereinafter referred to as resident. The Gated's HOA does not want golf carts on the roads. That's pretty clear. The city council member goes on to say, I've been told their assumption is that since the city doesn't have a golf cart ordinance, then they can enforce this. Response by resident back to city council, city manager, thanks city council member, correct. If the city allows carts on the city roads in our neighborhood, i.e. the public non-gated roads, then they wouldn't have a choice but to allow them on gated roads, private roads, our neighborhood. Wouldn't have a choice. That's what you call interference in our HOA. The city council member is then told in another email by resident, when the non-gated members fall under this ordinance, so goes the gated section. And he goes on to say, our current issue is the complexity of the HOA to change bylaws. This would be easier. Ladies and gentlemen, the complexity of our bylaws is called taking a vote. So with full knowledge of this resident's objective to circumvent our HOA covenants through a PTV ordinance, additional emails showed legal and staff resources were enlisted at city expense to explore this PTV ordinance. And 2 months later, in September of 2019, a council working session was held to discuss the PTV ordinance. I very much appreciated Councilwoman Cookerly's comments a couple of weeks ago, including when she said there's a difference between working with them and controlling them. What we have now is the same group trying to control city council. Although they are few in number in comparison to the entirety of White Columns, they are loud and they are notorious for asking forgiveness rather than permission. So what we're asking you is to change the language of the existing PT ordinance that has compromised our ability to enforce our covenants. Thank you.
Thank you. Will you please call the next speaker?
I invite Joe Gaines to the podium.
Evening. My name is Joe Gaines. I live at 540 Trayburn View. I've been a Milton resident for 10 years. With respect to the PTV ordinance, the city interfered in our HOA when it passed a flawed ordinance that put ours and other HOAs covenants at risk, which every homeowner agrees to when they purchase a home in an HOA-controlled environment. A former city council member started all this 4 years ago when they entertained actions to purposely help pro-PTV residents get around our covenants. Please do the right thing by fixing this amendment. It is okay to say mistakes were made at some point. Thank you.
Thank you. Will you please call the next speaker?
Kelly Lafferty.
How's this work? Okay. My name is Kelly Lafferty, and I live at 1260 Rolling Links Drive. I'm in the gated section of White Columns. I appreciate your presentation. It answered a lot of questions. I wasn't sure if I should still come up here and speak, but I guess you have to vote on that, so I will come up here and speak. I live in the gated section of White Columns. Our streets are private, so the rules on our streets are supposed to be governed by our HOA covenants. By the way, I've been in White Columns for 12 years. Our covenants say no golf carts on the streets. However, they exist. I actually had a visitor on a golf cart just a couple days ago, and I was looking at the golf cart trying to see like if it followed all the rules. Of course, there were no seat belts, and I don't know who's going to enforce all of this, because what's going to happen is people are just going to drive whatever kind of cart you want to call it. There's not going to be seat belts. There's dogs on the carts. There's children on the carts. There's accidents that can happen. There's people that have died at Polo, Say Knives. I feel like they're just ridiculously dangerous, and I feel like we already have enough problems with teenagers and that kind of thing. But anyway, I'll get back to my my write-up. So however, the carts do exist on our streets. I'm concerned with safety first and foremost. People are stating that because of Milton's new PTV ordinance that they can drive on the streets. There's confusion between, is it a golf cart versus a PTV? And since folks are using the new PTV language to get around our covenants, I just think it's important and imperative that you guys just fix the language in there, and then we can bring it back to the HOA and duke it out there. And you guys don't have to be accused of getting involved in the White Columns HOA anymore. And I'm just encouraging you to vote yes, or however you guys do this, to amend the language. Thank you.
Thank you. Will you please call the next speaker?
Mayor, I invite Jim Penman to the podium, please.
Thank you. Good evening. I think about a year ago, if I was giving good odds on whether I would be here talking about the difference between a PTV and a golf cart, I'd have given you pretty good odds on that. I didn't think saw that in my future. I've spent quite a bit of time the last few weeks looking at definitions and so on. There's the board's definition through their lawyer of what a PTV is. There's and whether it's the same as a golf cart. There's the counter argument from a different lawyer that explains whether those two terms are interchangeable. And my conclusion from all that was that, as I once heard, if you want 3 different opinions, just ask 2 lawyers, and you'll end up with 3 different opinions. No offense, sir.
Sorry, sir. Can you say your name and address for the record? Sorry about that. Sorry, I missed.
Jim Penman, 1270 Rolling Links Drive.
Thank you.
For what it's worth, my personal opinion on this is that if you take a standard golf cart like the one I was playing golf with this afternoon, and you put a few safety features on it and dangle some children's legs out of the back of the vehicle, it doesn't change the general nature of that vehicle. But really, that's, in my opinion, what the only difference is between a PTV and a golf cart. I think I'm going to take a slightly different angle here in terms of my opinion on this. When covenants are written, I would imagine when developments are made, and we make the decision whether we're going to have golf carts, PTVs or not. I imagine safety is a primary consideration. If it isn't, it should be. And so a decision was made in our White Columns neighborhood a long time ago that we didn't want golf carts or PTVs in our neighborhood. And again, looking at this from a slightly different angle, I can tell you an example of a group of people who don't differentiate those two terms, and that would be the ER doctors. They're the people who see the accidents caused with these vehicles on a regular basis. A wise married man will normally turn to his wife and ask their opinion on something like this, anything that they're undecided on. And I'm a wise man, and I asked my wife, who happens to be well qualified in this, she's an ER doctor at the local hospital. And, she would tell you that accidents using these carts are regular, particularly during the summer months. She will tell you that the nature of the accidents from these vehicles are, in most cases, more severe than through conventional road traffic accidents. They don't have the same protection, etc. Of the people within the vehicle. Children in particular are harmed greatly. We've heard examples of 2 Gulf communities where people actually died in accidents with these vehicles. And the other key thing that people tend to forget is that a lot of the people driving these carts are minors, even though they shouldn't be. The reality is that these aren't policed the way they should be within neighborhoods. And a lot of the accidents are caused by minors driving golf carts. In White Columns right now, we regularly see minors driving golf carts or PTVs. So I think, when you're making your decision on whether to weigh in on this and so on, I'd encourage you to think about safety first. Were those vehicles truly distinguishable in terms of how they perform from a safety perspective? And that should really be your primary focus when considering this matter. So thank you.
Thank you. Will you please call the next speaker?
Dave LaVille.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. My name is Dave Lavelle. I live at 15400 White Columns Drive in the Gulf section of White Columns. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. It's very concerning to us that the language in Milton's PTV ordinance has created a loophole for the White Columns Board to interpret it in the way of their choosing and ignore our community covenants. It's also concerning, it appears that they'd worked in stealth mode with some city officials in the past, find a way to manipulate our approval process and forego a community vote. It makes zero sense for golf carts to be allowed in our community. The HOA board lobbied so hard for radar-controlled speed signs because, as they said, White Columns Drive is the most dangerous street in Milton, and claimed that there were multiple recordings of speeds over 70 miles per hour in their most recent speed survey. When I Google PTV or golf cart sales in Milton, I get the same companies that come up in the search. LSV of Alpharetta, located in Crabapple, has this exact quote on their website, and I quote, "There are several requirements that will make your golf cart street legal," end quote. And there's a link that goes directly to the city ordinance of Milton that'll tell you how to make your golf cart street legal. The other company that comes up is Bintelli, and their site has a header that reads, "Select your Bintelli beyond street legal golf cart." Please fix the problem you've created. Please do not consider the personal relationships some city council members and employees have developed with this HOA board. Do not allow the loophole to remain. Please define PTVs as golf carts, since that's exactly how the sellers in this community define them. My wife and I may be in the minority with this example, but we still have a home phone. Many people now call that a landline, but that doesn't make it any less of a phone. And a PTV is just a golf cart with modifications, but it's still a golf cart. If our HOA board felt that the community would give widespread support for approving these carts, on the road, they wouldn't have tried to backdoor the approval process. And if they actually cared about the safety of our residents and cared about their opinions, they'd put this to a vote. You now have the chance to correct the issue that you as a group created. Please do the right thing.
Thank you. Will you please call the next speaker?
Julia, and my apologies, DeCretico. I don't know if I got that right.
My name is Julia DeCretico. I live at 125 White Columns Drive. And I have been in front of y'all before, was it a month or 2 months ago, whatever it was, in the general comment section. So you're well aware that I think golf carts are PTVs and PTVs are golf carts. And I also live in the speed zone of White Columns Drive that makes it particularly dangerous for a group of kids trotting up the street to go see their pals in their dad's PTV. It's just not going to be safe. And for a very long time, White Columns as a neighborhood has understood that and accepted that. There's a term that you might have learned in world history, though, about ruling by fiat. And what that term refers to is an individual or group who has the authority to enforce what they believe, puts out a proclamation. That's the fiat. I'm going to rule by this proclamation, and then I'm going to enforce it the way I believe these rules are said. So regardless of our bylaw saying no golf carts on White Column Street, we get a proclamation in our email that says the bylaws are moot. We're going to enforce it the way we believe it should be enforced. And therefore, all the signatures you made when you bought your house don't apply anymore because I put out this proclamation. And it's wiggle room. It all comes down to wiggle room. If we fix the little wiggle room that all of our neighboring communities have fixed, the authoritarian, sent emails of this is the way it is, it won't matter. Because the rules say, no, I'm sorry, you can't register your PTV in a White Column Street because there's an HOA rule against it. There's an HOA rule that says in your bylaws, golf carts aren't allowed. So sorry, you can't even register your vehicle. Your 14-year-old can't be out on the streets driving it. You can't drive through the country club to come over on our streets to visit your pals in the afternoon. Just the way I feel. Thank you for your time. And I do appreciate, I know I've discussed this before, but I do appreciate you setting aside some time tonight, mayor, staff, attorneys, council, setting aside the time to listen to us again and to really consider this and make a final decision on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Will you please call the next speaker?
I invite Mary Cronk to the podium.
Good evening. My name is Mary Cronk, and I live at 600 Hickory Mill Lane in the Estates of Hickory Mill neighborhood. I am not in White Columns, but I'm also in a covenant-protected community. And I'm here this evening to ask council to ensure to the best of your ability that this amendment does not have the unintended consequence of overriding a community's covenants. My concern is that this amendment may conflict with covenants in communities other than White Columns as well, that prohibit golf carts from being driven on their streets. We all know people buy homes in covenant-protected communities with the reasonable expectation that the rules within the covenants will be upheld. Rules like the color that you can paint your house, the color and type of your roofing, and even whether golf carts are allowed to be driven on your streets. And if those rules were to change, the process required by the covenants would be followed to do so. That would be your expectation. And that it wouldn't change as a result of a verbiage change in a city ordinance. I believe the city council has no intention of overriding any community's covenants and would not do so intentionally. But that's why I'm asking council to take the time to carefully consider the verbiage of this amendment and get feedback from our legal counsel, who's done so much work on this, to ensure that this or really any amendment would not override or conflict with the community's covenants. And as always, I thank you very much for your time and your careful consideration of all of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Will you please call the next speaker?
That concludes public comment for this item. Mayor.
Okay, I'll close public comment and council discussion or questions for city attorney. Any questions for Ken? I have a quick question, Ken. So I never thought I'd be an expert on this, but think I'm closely becoming one. So I was trying to read your language compared to what we currently have on the books.
Right.
And I know the situation we have at hand, where no golf carts are allowed on streets, but PTVs are allowed on streets. Is that language, is that still in effect? Because the way I read this, it still says we don't allow golf carts on city streets, but we allow PTVs.
And see, that's the trick, though. It depends upon how you are construing golf cart. If you're construing it under Title 41 of state law, yeah, that's right, because a golf cart and a PTV are different. But what the other, I'm going to keep going back to what the other jurisdictions have done, because that was really what the direction I felt like was from staff. And so I'm going to kind of camp out in that ballpark. Those references to golf cart and those other jurisdictions are not trying to reference the state law statutory definition. They are attempting to speak in everyday words or word usage to make, I believe, those ordinances easier to understand from a historical connotation. That is exactly what I think they're doing. And that's what I thought you all wanted me to look at, was whether it would, not whether it's going to make any sense, because that is to the council. But what they've done, and could it be done here? The answer is yes, it could be. So I believe it's three things. I think it's intention, clarification, and clarity is what we're talking about.
And I just want to make sure, I guess, no matter what side of this you're kind of on, that, PTVs are still legal on city streets as long as they make those definitions.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. Yes.
Okay.
So I guess the only question I'd say is PTVs are still legal on our.
PTVs are the only things that are legal.
Right. But we also, I think I heard you saying, I heard a number of the people say, I went back and I listened to all these meetings, listened to the discussions from the very beginning. I have actually seen a number of emails. I think the intent here was never to supersede some HOAs within all of Milton. But we've mainly had one here. We've had another council member talk. I don't think it ever was the intent to override. In fact, that was part of the discussion in like 3 different meetings that I listened to. So I appreciate what you've done here. I think you bring what this verbiage does. We've seen all the other cities and jurisdictions around us all have similar wording to this, because what we even discuss as a council, and I was on that council, I think this just clarifies it to say we're talking about golf carts, or what colloquially said was a golf cart.
So it's the part in red? I'm sorry.
Oh,
Okay.
That's correct, Councilman Cooper.
Okay.
I mean, it's not accidental, for instance. I mean, again, you see in these other codes, the clear intention of the drafters that usage is not supposed to be a technical usage. You see language in a code that says, which are commonly called. Okay, that's a signal that we're not talking about a hyper pedantic legal expression of that term. It's supposed to be a colloquial expression of that term. And that's why I think they've done that. And
Okay, well, it appears that some would say that the unintended consequence of us not getting it right the first time interfered in the business of a certain community. And then others would say that if we change it, we're interfering with the business of a certain community. So
yeah, let me address that. I mean, I don't have my compendium of covenants book in my office. So let me be very clear that I don't review the totality of Milton or any of the multiple jurisdictions that I represent, their covenants when we draft laws. If there is any friction or tension between those, have I seen that before? Yes, and that's regrettable. I can tell you this council did not intend to interfere with anything of the kind. You all adopt, under your police power, you have the ability to adopt ordinances that have citywide impact. But at least for me as your attorney, that is not where my heart or my mind would have been.
Well, Counselor, for the inclusion of this language, do you see Or has any unintended consequence occurred to you on this particular language?
No, I mean, again, what I can tell you is to the extent we do this, we're in reasonably good company with other jurisdictions that don't have these subdivisions in them. And so someone obviously saw some merit to doing this. I don't think there's any particular evil that occurs should we not do it, but I can certainly understand if the council chooses.
So in a sense, it creates a distinction, but not necessarily a difference.
That's it. I believe it's clarifying as to the intention of the council. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And I think going to that intention, I never thought, Councilor Morgan, myself, were you on council then? I don't know. I never thought we'd be here probably 4 or 5 years later. And I think, to Councilor Morgan's point, I think our intention was mirror state code and let every HOA determine if they want golf cart, PTVs, or,
Yeah.
let them decide what they want to
That's correct.
do. So I think that intent is important.
Last question. When it says, I notice language is consistent in PTVs, or golf carts have to meet this definition in order to be PTVs. Is that fluid? So if the state changes, or if there are any changes that are uniform in what constitutes a PTV, it automatically carries through?
We could draft it that way. We did not draft it that way. So right now, it's only internal looking.
Okay.
So if state law got modified, we need to modify our state definitional section as
Well,
well.
that's fine.
Yeah.
That works. Okay.
Questions for Ken before we open it for a motion?
Just real quick, I know this topic has been out there for probably many months. And I was just curious if we have heard from other neighborhoods in Milton, and I know we don't have access to review any of their covenants. But have we heard from any other communities specifically? And will this modification affect any of them right now?
Councilor Rivera, from speaking from myself with respect to your first question, I've not heard from any other subdivision. As to the second question, I don't know.
One. Mary.
Save tonight, save tonight. And then as to the intended or unintended consequences, I have no idea. And I mean that in good faith because I'm just suggesting to you, I haven't reviewed them, nor will I seek to.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? All right, with that, I will open it for a motion.
Where is it? Who's doing it?
23
Are you doing it?
122.
Go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve agenda item number 23-122, authorizing legal counsel to go through and codify this and bring it back to council for review and a formal vote.
You have a second, Councilman Jacobus, second. All right, I have a motion from Councilmember Morgan, a second from Councilmember Jacobus to approve agenda item 23-122. Any discussion on the motion? I will say I'm very concerned. I guess my only issue I have with the motion, I hear exactly where everyone's coming from on this issue. It's been out there for a very, very long time. And it disturbs me a little bit that we have not heard from other neighborhoods. If we heard from other neighborhoods, I think I would be more inclined to support that and really understand it. But since it's all from one neighborhood, I really think that debate and discussion should probably be within that neighborhood.
Can I give you a counter to that?
Absolutely.
As I think about it, what we've heard from all these other communities. I mean, we're keeping it in the perspective of all these other communities, so I'm not sure that we could be out of bounds.
I understand completely. All right.
I'm sorry.
All right.
Mr. Mayor.
I have a motion from Councilmember Morgan, second from Councilmember Jacobus. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries 4-2. Thank you all for coming out. Okay, we will move on to mayor and council reports. Do we have anything to say? Any council members? Anything? No? All right. With that, we will adjourn to executive session to discuss personnel, land acquisition, and potential litigation. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
All right, I have a motion from Councilor Morgan, a second from Councilor Jacobus to adjourn into executive session. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That's unanimous. So, all in favor, say aye. Aye. So that was Morg and then myself,
You got my keys.
or myself, okay. And then can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
So moved. Oh, yeah. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Mulvey
I
says
got
yes.
it.